Now, meek is not a word most of us want applied to us. When we think of meek people, we think of people who are easily imposed upon, people we can talk into doing just about anything, people who are quiet and humble to the point of being submissive. We equate meek with mousy, and no one wants to be thought of as mousy. Well, the problem is our language today has distorted the meaning of the word meek. For in his day, Jesus would have been considered a meek person. Meek in first century Israel describes someone who was not quick-tempered and someone who was slow to violence. A meek person was strong enough to resist fighting back. A meek person did not take advantage of their position. A meek person admitted their sins openly to God and asked God to forgive and heal those sins. A meek person was everything that Roman rulers, Roman soldiers, and Jewish elite were not. Now, in Matthew's Sermon on the Mount, Jesus was talking to a crowd that lived near Capernaum, which was on the northern bank of the Sea of Galilee. And it was a seaside home to many Roman officials and many Roman soldiers, as well as Jewish rulers. Herod Antipas, one of the sons of Herod, lived up in that area. And there were the elite Jews, but most Jews in the area either worked for or sold wares to Romans. And there was a distinctive class, cultural, and socioeconomic status between Jews and Romans. Romans had wealth, power, and status. Jews did not. Romans had soldiers and weapons to violently enforce their orders. Jews did not. Rome had a well-equipped army. Jews did not. Rome was the ruling class. Jews were the ones who were being ruled. Romans were arrogant, while Jews did not dare show a hint of arrogance. So Jesus was talking to people who needed to know the difference between being meek and being docile. They needed to know the difference between being meek and being defeated. They needed to know how to submit to Roman orders while still maintaining their own dignity. They needed to know how to be humble without being humiliated. They needed to follow orders without being defiant. They needed to be strong enough to be meek. Now, later in Matthew's fifth chapter, Jesus said that the Jews in Israel had been taught to follow the laws of Moses, which were absolutely true. And that law allowed people to return violence in equal measure to the violence that had been done to them. We know it as an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So if somebody takes out your eye, you can take out one of theirs. If somebody knocks out a tooth, you can knock out one of theirs. If somebody murders your brother, you can murder their brother. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, violence in equal measure. But Jesus took a bold step toward meekness when he said his followers could not only not return violence, but they were to resist violence. If somebody slapped them on the right cheek, they were to offer their left cheek as well. Being meek meant having the strength not to hit back. Roman soldiers had the right to order any Jew to drop whatever they were doing, and upon their order carry their 85-pound sack with them 1 mile. Well, Jesus said, don't just carry it 1 mile, carry it 2 miles. Jews in first century dressed in 3 layers. There was their undergarment, their coat, and their cloak. Jesus said, if somebody wanted to take your cloak, give them your coat as well. In other words, rather than fight, sulk, or resist those who had more power, Jesus urged his followers to be meek. Jesus wanted his followers to be strong enough to do what was asked without sulking, resisting, or hitting back. Sulking, resisting, and hitting back would escalate the situation into more violence, more pain, and more loss for all those involved. Somewhere in the last 2,000 years, we've come to believe that being meek is the same thing as being weak. We've come to believe that showing humility is being humiliated. We've come to believe that violence is solved only with more violence. We've come to believe that if we don't hit back, if we don't strike back, we will have failed to uphold our dignity. We have come to believe that power is right. The last time, and believe me, it was the last time, about 20 years ago, I went to a professional hockey game. The crowd did not get excited in spite of fantastic play by both teams. They didn't get excited until two hockey players got into a fight. One of the players, for no good reason, dropped their gloves and started wailing on the other guy, who was wearing a helmet. The other guy felt the need to start hitting back, and they both ended up in the penalty box. The fight was pointless. In football, one player will lash out at another, usually out of frustration, and who gets the penalty? The guy who hits back. Hitting back is pointless. In basketball, the unwritten rule is when one player makes hard contact, makes a foul with hard contact, with or without meaning to, the other player has to hit back or suffer a loss of dignity. Hitting back does not equal dignity. In baseball, if somebody throws at your head, well, your pitcher better throw at the head of the first person who comes to bat on the other team. They all get thrown out of the game. Hitting back is pointless. When discussing politics today, the unwritten rule seems to be if somebody disagrees with our point of view, we better be the first one to call names and insults. Friendships and the ability to work together are lost, and we have forgotten that meekness leads to listening, to learning, and to working together for the greater good. We have forgotten that the meek will inherit the earth. We've forgotten that God gave us this incredibly beautiful earth as a blessing to be cared for and developed and loved. We've forgotten that the more we use and abuse this world and each other, the more we will succeed in destroying the happiness of everyone. We have forgotten when faced with violence and accusation in his life, Jesus was strong enough to resist hitting, to resist speaking out, to resist hurting anyone. Jesus said the meek will be happy, for they will inherit the earth. And let's face it, being meek while being strong takes practice. But meekness with strength is desperately needed in our world. For today, the meek will not only inherit the earth, it is very likely that the meek will be the ones who will save this earth from destruction. Being meek begins with knowing why the buttons that get pushed. You all know what I'm talking about? Why the buttons that get pushed lead us toward a temper burst or violence. To deal with being meek, we have to learn why, when somebody says or does something, we feel the need to lash out. And that begins by doing a searching, as we say in 12 steps, a searching and fearless inventory of ourselves, by naming, claiming, and accepting our own strengths and weaknesses. We have to know the things that we are good at, as well as the things we're not. The things that we like, as well as the things we don't like about who we are. Because once we name who we are, both good and bad, we have the opportunity to share those discoveries with God and dig just a little bit deeper. Because as we tell God who we are and why we respond when certain buttons are pushed, we can ask ourselves some other things. What do we like about ourselves, and where did we learn that from? Who in our lives has taught us to be strong while meek? Where in our lives did we learn that when a button is pushed, we've got to hit back? Who taught us, or where did we learn that arrogance is the cover to insecurity? What wound from the past is causing us to act out with hurtful words and physical harm to others? And where do we truly need God's help to heal from the experiences of our past? Are we willing to ask God for healing, or are we keeping God at arm's length so we can keep on being the tough one? We can keep on being the one who's in control, because we can insult faster, we can name call better, and we can hit harder. Why do we believe that harming another person is the answer to any question? As we talk with God, we can ask God to take away the things we know are keeping us from being a strong yet meek person. A person like Jesus. As we talk with God, we can ask God to help us grow more and more like Jesus. A meek person with incredible inner and spiritual strength. A person of peace, grace, and hope. As we talk with Jesus, we can learn that if somebody wants to hit us, we just open our arms and say, okay, do it again. Yeah, it's going to hurt, but it's not going to destroy me. Yes, it's going to hurt, but I don't have to hit back. Now, just a qualifier here. If you are in an abusive relationship where you are being physically or emotionally harmed, excuse me, you don't have to take it. Get out. Don't hit back, run. Don't hit back, don't stay. Go to the domestic violence center, come talk to me, go to a friend's, call your mother, I don't care who you call. Get out. Because nobody has to submit themselves to physical or emotional or intellectual abuse. Okay, is that the clarifier? Y'all got it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. But otherwise, when somebody has the need to strike, we can either escalate it by striking back, or we can just offer the other cheek until they run out of energy, until they run out of power, until they run out of anger. And we can say, what happened? For the meek will inherit the earth, and not only will they inherit the earth, in today's world, it's going to be the meek who save this earth. Amen.